Ahoy, and welcome back to Titanic Talkline. My name is Alexia, and this week I'm very excited to introduce Paul Bavill, who for some reason says he has a really hard to pronounce last name, but it doesn't seem that hard to me.
Not compared to yours, no.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's super valid. How are you?
I'm okay. It's been a long day, and now I'm here. I've got the house to myself, and I can get angry about history. It's what I enjoy doing.
Yes, because for those who do not know, your podcast is, why am I talking about your podcast? Why don't you tell us about your podcast?
Oh, my favorite subject. Yes.
Yay.
So yeah, I've been going for about 3 years now. My podcast is called History Rage. It kind of started by accident when I was looking to do some video work at a festival, and I just started grabbing speakers and putting them on camera and going, "So, tell me the one thing you wish everyone would just stop believing." And then I realized that I live in the north of England and everybody that I wanted to interview lives in the south of England. And that wasn't going to work as a video project, but it did work as a podcast. So I started that out. And our whole hook is we ask that rage question: what is the one thing you wish everyone would just stop believing? And we get museum curators, authors, historians, TV types on to debunk their particular myth. So to give a few examples, we've had James Holland on, quite famous World War II author. He came on to do two, which were the Battle of Britain was not a close run thing. It was an absolute decisive whipping. And the other was that Blitzkrieg should have caught nobody by surprise at all because it's what Germany had been doing for 200 years. We've had a few others. Our first one, we had lady from the Surgeon Hall Museum in Edinburgh, and she came on to talk that Burke and Hare are not body snatchers, despite being the world's most famous body snatchers. They never actually steal a body their entire career. They are just murderers. And it's that sort of angry myth debunking that we are built on. We've been going for about 3 years now. It's just coming up to our third anniversary at the end of August. And I've got a queue of guests as long as my arm. If I only recorded the people I've got booked in, I could still run a show a week until the end of December. So yeah, it's chaotic.
Well, in a fun way. And like, right before we hit record, you were telling me that getting, more into the subject of this show, that every year you do a Titanic episode. And before I get into my primary question, have you had someone come on yet who's the thing they wish people would stop talking about the Titanic was Jack and Rose aren't real?
Not yet. No, we
Oh,
kind of all accept that one. And I've got both me and my guest had a lot to say about Rose DeWitt Picator, a lot to say. But yes, it's one of my particular bugbears is Jack and Rose because hell, is the Titanic disaster not dramatic enough?
I think that's kind of also where I'm coming from. And it's for me, it's also too sort of like I love the movie Titanic though, and I like it for what it is, but I think that there's just so much energy that goes into them that I feel could be put into remembering the real people involved. That's how I feel about it. That's just me.
Yeah, particularly, I think not taking those people that are involved and doing a massively different counterproductive story against their own character, which would be
Yeah.
one of the many things that I'm going to get out of my system tonight. Because the downside of my podcast is I don't get to do my own rages. So here I am.
Yeah, this basically all I am doing is acting as the host of History Rage today. Uh, but it's about Titanic. So let's get into that because the first thing I do want to ask just super quickly before we get into the actual raging is what is your overall Titanic story? Just, for the listeners, how did Titanic become such an interest of yours?
Well, most people in this day and age will go, "Oh, I watched Cameron's movie," and I didn't actually because I am suitably old enough. I turned 50 at the end of last year, so I'm old enough to have been brought into this by the absolute classic, which is A Night to Remember.
Hmm.
The timeless Kenneth More portraying Charles Lightoller, and what I think is actually the best Titanic movie out there. And that got me into it. And then once you've found a hook that you're into in history, then you start to explore it further and further and further. And what I uncovered was a whole load of conspiracy theories and nonsense, which with my debunking brain on just got me looking further. It's like, is that right? Does that happen? Is that a real thing? And then it's just taken on from there. So I'm here without any sort of kind of professional Titanic credential, just a morbid interest in a shipping disaster that has spanned the bulk of my life.
I feel like that's a lot of people I have on the show. Like I know that there's some shows that, they only want to talk to experts. I want to talk to everybody because, I don't think that I didn't have any academic introduction to this show. I just have a lot of opinions and a microphone. So that's how I decided to get involved in it. But yeah, we were talking super briefly before we started in, and you were saying that a lot of your personal ire is directed at the A42 mentioned, very popular 1997 James Cameron film.
Yes.
Let's
Yes.
get started.
Light that blue. Now,
For the people
do
who
me
can't
wrong.
see, his eyes just lit up and got so big. I'm so excited.
I I think so. Cards on the table, first of all, is like you, if you do take the movie for what it is an enjoyable movie. And I will give them credit in that they took an awful lot of attention to detail with the ship. And they took an awful lot of attention to detail with certain things that happen over the course of that. So there's an interview, for example, with one of the set designers and set engineers, and they built this whole thing on a hydraulic lift. So at any point in the film, the whole set is at the same angle that the Titanic was at the time of that part of the film. And that level of detail is absolutely phenomenal. And I'll not, completely ruin a movie over historical inaccuracies and so forth. It's not the most inaccurate Titanic movie that's ever been put out. After all, you're aware that the Nazis made one in 1934. Yes, if you've never seen that out there, listeners, don't. It's an hour and a half long. About 1 hour of it is made up with some really dodgy investment decisions and a lot of kind of financial conspiracy theory. And then about 30 minutes of poor people drowning and screaming while a heroic German that they've replaced Lightoller with does something about it. And it's absolutely awful. Um, but they've gone to all these lengths, and then they also go to the same level of length to reinforce so many ridiculous, never-ending Titanic tropes, which drive me bloody insane. And it's these that I'd like to get out of my system tonight.
Yes, please. Because, and I'm sure that, listeners of the show, some of these we've probably already talked about, but I'm sure that some of these we haven't. So I'm very excited to get into this.
Excellent. So kicking off is going to be the monstering of Ismay. And the reason that this is at the top of the list is I actually ran a thing on Twitter a few days ago. It's like, I just threw out a question there of who's been the most maligned person in popular culture. And people were coming back with like Richard III and stuff. But I came out with Ismay. And a lot of people came back to me and said, oh, surely it should be Murdoch. And it was a very close thing, the way that Cameron portrays Murdoch and the way that he portrays Ismay. But the reason I fell down on this side of the fence was Murdoch gets gratuitously defamed in one movie, the Cameron movie. Ismay gets gratuitously defamed in every Titanic movie going, including the Nazi one.
One thing they have in common.
Yeah, I mean, you take A Night to Remember. He's basically one of the first off. And then you forget about him until about 40 minutes later when the ship goes down and you can just see him going, oh, from the lifeboat. And then you've got the just let me get my dates there. Then you've got the miniseries that was on British television by the creator of Downton Abbey, which
Oh
just
my
went to
gosh.
absolutely monster him even further
That's such a good
to
show.
the point where he's ordering Captain Smith to like just set warp speed 9 to charge on into this iceberg because we're going to get the blue ribbon. It's like, let me tell you this, fellows, they're not. Okay,
No,
we know they're not. We know Mauritania has the blue ribbon from about 3 years earlier. We also know that Titanic can't match Mauritania's speed. And we know this because they have sea trials for this sort of shit. It's a matter of public record.
exactly.
It's just
And
why that myth even comes about. I just don't know. Then you've got Cameron's Titanic, which just takes a bad character and just destroys him even more. I mean, you've got them all seated around that table while Rose DeWitt Burkhardt is making veiled knob gags and references to Freud, who doesn't actually publish his work for another 8 years.
This is true.
So, well done there, Rose. If you were that clairvoyant, you should have seen the fucking iceberg, shouldn't you? And it's just this constant monstering of a man his only crime is he survived.
Mm-hmm.
He survived, and somebody had to carry the can for it. And he's the chairman of White Star, and he has this feud with William Randolph Hearst. It just gets monstered in all the newspapers after the event, and that's just stuck and stuck and stuck for absolutely no reason. And one of the things that really galls me about the kind of aftermath, particularly with the Cameron movie, is everybody's zeroed in on the portrayal of Murdoch, which I absolutely bang on agree is totally unfair, to the point where Cameron's had to actually pay about £5,000 out to a school that bears Murdoch's name in Dalkeith.
This is also
And
true.
yet we totally sit there as he repeatedly monsters a survivor. I mean, come on. And it's like the Titanic disaster ruined Ismay's life. He never recovered from the survivor guilt that came along with that. It was absolutely no way to live. And that is the treatment that he gets. This idea that he's just going to get onto the lifeboat at the earliest possible time is just patently ridiculous. We know when that lifeboat that he was in left. He leaves on collapsible boat 8B. It is practically swept off the deck. We have got testimony at the inquiry where Archibald Gracie comments that he has seen right up until the end, he's seen Ismay lifting people into lifeboats. He stayed there until the only thing he could have done on that ship was die.
Mm-hmm.
And then he gets into a lifeboat because there's nobody else. Everybody else has buggered off up the stern end. Yeah, there is no point to staying in there. And it drives me absolutely insane that you get all this monstering through of him. Excuse me a moment.
It's, just while he takes a second, it's really interesting to think about it because it's, as you were saying, it's now become the accepted narrative where to discuss the other side of it makes you sound like the conspiracy theorist in a weird way, where you're like, maybe it's not true, and everyone's like, yeah, listen,
yeah, there's actually an interview with Cameron where somebody raised this issue of, do you not think you're monstering Ismay? And his response was, well, the public demand a monstrous Ismay. And I think, why? People out there, why do you demand a monstrous Ismay? The guy did the best that he could. And he's blamed for a lot of things that I really don't think he should be blamed for as well. I mean, this, like I said, I hinted there earlier, this idea that you see in the repeated movies where, oh, we're going to get the blue ribbon. You're not. You can't beat Mauritania. Ismay knows that because the one thing Ismay does, and the one thing you see in all of Ismay's like press conferences and speeches that he makes is he just sits and talks about like engineering tables and performance figures. Like he knows full well that they're not beating Mauritania, and it would be ridiculous to do so. What's more, it's not even White Star's business model.
no.
This is why they're very keen to not call third class steerage. There is no steerage on Titanic. White Star's entire business model is come and be in luxury and cruise nicely, cruise gently. We will get you there, and you will be in this floating city of utter luxury. Ismay the only probably person that knows that ship better than Ismay, I would say, would be Thomas Andrews himself. But this idea that he's going to do that, and then you get this idea as well that he's then going to order Captain Smith to start doing stuff so that we can, what they use in the film is that they go, oh, so we could get into New York 2 days early. Really? Has anybody sat down and thought about how much of a screw up that will be for the 2,200 people that are on board that ship? It is absolutely crazy. I mean, you turn up to New York 2 days early. Where the hell are you going to go?
Yeah, this is
You're not
not the
going
day of
anywhere.
phones. You can't call and say, "Hey, I'm getting into town early. Can you come pick me up?"
Yeah, you've got to go. You've got to go to the radio room. You've got to send that message. That message's got to go through Cape Races, then got to land in White Star's offices, and off. Then they're going to. It's just it's ridiculous. You're going to be sat out. I mean, not least of which, even if you can communicate that I'm getting into New York a couple of days early, can you get me a cab? Can I sort out a new hotel room? You haven't actually got anywhere to dock. New York's a busy port. You just rock up out of the blue, particularly when you're the size of Titanic. You are sitting out there in the Hudson Bay and you are waiting at White Star expense. So nobody is getting into America any earlier, particularly not the third class passengers who've all got to go through Ellis Island. And there's already a whole load of people in Ellis Island being processed. So that's just going to add 2 days of queue to that. And that itself goes entirely against all of White Star's business planning. You want the whole thing to be nice and efficient and comfortable and not farting around waiting for immigration to clear you any more than you absolutely have to. That is what you are paying White Star for. And even if you are a third class passenger, just look at the ticket prices. These are not poverty stricken people. You take something like the Goodwins, that was found there, that family was £35 for them to cross on Titanic. That is more than Fred Goodwin earned in a month. You do not take that amount of money off people and then deliver them this massive inconvenience.
I don't know who it was that described it. I'm going to say it was Stephen Beale and be proven wrong later on, but he says we tend to think of passengers on Titanic as the haves and the have-nots, but we really need to think of them as the haves and the have a little lesses.
Yeah, or the haves and the have worked bloody hard just to achieve that one thing.
And that also is true. For some people, this may be like we are going to America, the once in a lifetime thing. We're gonna let's spend it all. Let's just do it.
Yeah,
You know.
but you've also got that thing, particularly with third class passengers as well, where White Star's whole business model is based around the emigrant market. Everybody that's in there in first class is just there to add some more money. I mean, on that voyage alone, that White Star actually makes more money from second class than it does from first. And but the emigrant market, that whole third class market, is where they're going because that's the thing that's going to pay the bills and all the voyages going backwards and forwards and keep this whole project going. And the plan being is that you get a guy that goes over, sets himself up his job in America, and then because he has traveled so comfortably on the White Star Line, he is going to send a telegram and tickets back to his wife and 6 children, who are then going to buy passage to join the family. That is the whole business model. So if you've got that guy that's just spent quite a considerable amount of his savings moving over here in the first place, and you have made that journey an absolute hell, then he's going to send a wire back to his family that goes, look, Mabel, I've been on White Star, but you may as well go on Hamburg America where it's a damn sight cheaper. That is not what White Star are after.
No, that would have been, as you said, counterintuitive to their entire business model. Their entire business model was let us take care of you. You
Yeah.
know,
I mean, they have that great, great marketing technique of they put their third class menu on postcards. And so you can send the postcard back and it's like, I've arrived safe and look at the lovely food they served people of our class. That's why when people zero in on like, oh, we're serving gruel on the Titanic. And it creates this like just Oliver Twist style mentality in people. I mean, I don't know if have you ever tried gruel?
personally, no, but it's
I
because
made it.
okay, I just know
I
the
made it.
consistency of those things tend to bother me,
Yeah.
but I don't not understand its importance.
Yeah, it's like two things. There's like number one, I grabbed hold of a Victorian recipe, and I actually grabbed hold of a Victorian workhouse recipe. So I was going the bottom
Mm.
end of the gruel market, and I made it, and it's not bad. I wouldn't like to make it a staple of my diet permanently.
Sure.
However, it's kind of thin water-based porridge, And then it is usually flavored. If you are before 1870, it'll be flavored with black treacle. If you are post 1870, it would be flavored with golden syrup. The golden syrup one is amazing. Do go out
Ooh.
there and try it.
Ooh.
Um, but yeah, it's a pretty decent breakfast food. And to be fair as well, when you've got a large group of people who probably aren't that used to sailing, having something like that will be a really good idea.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds similar to serving oatmeal, which, oatmeal people here is pretty popular, and also more southern in the United States, grits. Or if you're Chinese, congee. There's so many cultures that have some kind of like porridgey breakfast.
Porridgey bland food that you're
Porridgey,
not going
yes.
to throw up when you're in a rocking boat.
There
Yeah.
we go.
But yeah, it's like everything that we portray about Ismay then seems to be going down this counterintuitive
Hmm.
route that White Star just wouldn't go out of at all.
Right.
And as I say, there's the idea that, I mean, there was one, I think it was SOS Titanic, actually portrayed him as being dressed as a woman to get into a lifeboat.
I think you're right. I think that's the
And
one.
that's just, there is enough in the Titanic disaster that you don't need to make this shit up. So I say
No.
we don't need to add the whole Jack and Rose thing in there. And the two of the most annoying characters I've ever seen placed on film are those two people. My God, I think I was on somebody else's podcast around about the similar thing, and there's the line that came out of me from nowhere is that Jack has 3 sheets of paper with him, and that is the depth of his character.
That's kind of valid.
Yeah, yeah, I can start it. Yeah, I mean, do you want me to start raging on those two? Oh
We
my God.
could if that's where you want to go next, but it's just the thing that I always noticed about Jack was that I've had a sketchbook and I've seen people with sketchbooks. You've always got a couple of trash drawings in there where like when someone's flipping through, you're like, no, don't look. And you kind of whip through it. Every single one he draws is real, real good. And it's just like that is unrealistic, unless every bad one he's just tearing out and hucking into the water. But just no one's that good at art. Anyway, that's all
Yes,
I'm gonna say
yes.
on that one
Not
before we get
even
into it.
Van Gogh is that good at art.
No,
Yeah.
nobody is. Everyone's got a few like fucking weird ones, and they've got some sketches, and they've got some where you started, got 7 lines in, and realized it's going nowhere, so you went to another page.
Oh, but the conversations about that. I mean, I've never really dated an artist. I don't know about you, Alexia. Have you dated an artist?
I am the artist, and I've also dated a
You're
musician, so I think
yeah.
I have
It's
both
similar
dated the
kind
problem
of.
and I am the problem. So yes,
But yeah, I mean, if you met some guy on a cruise and he got his sketchbook out and started going, "Oh, look at this! This is the hands of this French prostitute that I got obsessed with," you'd be thinking, "Get me the fuck out of here now!"
I feel like I need an adult.
Yeah, it's
And
like if ever there was a lady that needed a chaperone, it is Rose DeWitt Bacata.
it is weird when you think about that for more than a fraction of a second. It's kind of like, wait,
Yeah, bit
wait, hang on.
creepy.
Hang on. Hang on a hot second. I need to think about this for more than 4 seconds. But yeah, I mean, I like the movie, but I am also very open to all of its criticisms because I'm aware that it has a lot of things to be super critical of, including a lot of that. But I think for me, what I use to dismiss it is the fact that she's supposed to be 17 and he's supposed to be like 21. And we all know that people of those age are not the smartest ones we've met.
Yes, and also, if in terms of being able to defend what is frankly one of the most ridiculous plot lines I've ever said as well,
Sure.
we are not looking at a history of the Titanic disaster. We are looking at the blinkered memories of a 101-year-old woman who, right at the start, admits that she's got memory problems.
And that's also super important. And, that's also why I think it's hilarious when people like, not to Neil deGrasse Tyson call out, but when he was like, it's about the stars, I'm like, I don't think this woman remembers what the stars looked like back then, man. I think
Yeah,
she just remembered they were there.
yeah, it was nighttime. There was an iceberg. That was about it, really.
Basically. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that once you start to think about it for more than a second, you're just like, you just need to, as you said, when you defend it, just like, it's this woman telling her story. I'm sure there's something in there that's fucking weird.
I have to say though that if I was, and I'll grant you, I've not got the same level of memory problems and things like that, but essentially, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there that Rose must be making up because she just can't have seen it. And
Well,
if I'm
that's
going to
also
make
true.
up that story, I'm going to make myself less of a vapid, spoilt bitch by doing so.
Well, because you know, you're absolutely right. Because like the scene that immediately popped into my head was her mom at tea when Molly Brown comes down. She wasn't there. It was
Yeah,
just Ruth and her friends. So I mean, obviously not every scene. I mean, it would have been a really, really piss poor movie if every scene had Rose in it. You know, it's like, oh God, we can't get away from her. And you do need other people's perspectives in this kind of storytelling. But as you said, if conceptually it's supposed to be one person sitting and speaking to a room full of people, how the fuck does she know what was said at tea? You weren't there. You
yeah,
were looking at a prostitute hand. You were looking at a sex worker's hands and also just trusting his story. How do you know?
yeah. I mean, you've got this just third class guy that just appears
It's like, yeah,
in
I
a
was just
place where he physically can't get to.
exactly. And then he's just like, yeah, I just really liked her hands. Like, this is not a normal conversation.
Yeah, yeah. This is the sort of conversation that would get you blocked on Tinder.
Uh-oh, that was an inside thought.
Yeah. And yeah, I would have, if you were sitting in a room talking about your life story and a major historical event that you took part in, you'd make yourself look good here, wouldn't you?
I think most people make themselves look good in most stories. I mean,
Yeah.
even
You
when you're
don't recount the bit where you body slammed a first class steward into a flooded lift and made him take you down. Like, go down the fucking stairs, woman.
no, you don't normally, unless you do that thing where you're like, he was just, I don't know, just he was yelling at me and being really aggressive, and it just finally had to like push him out of my way. But yeah, I don't. It is just interesting because yeah, as I said, as we said, if you think about it for more than like 5 seconds, it starts to fall apart. But that is a lot of movies, sadly.
It's the one big for me is I mean, the whole concept of having Jack just appear in first class anyway is just a physical impossibility and has breached about 50 US immigration laws at
Yeah.
the time just by mixing the two. But then to bring him to dinner and have him sat around that table, and sat at that table are, if memory serves me correctly, I believe Captain Smith is at that table.
It is not the captain's table. He's
It's
at the one
not the
like
captain's table,
next
no.
to it, but they are
However,
right there.
Ismay is
Hmm.
sat at that table. The
Yeah, he is.
chairman of the line, who's about to get a massive fine for breaching all those US immigration rules, is sitting there while Rose makes knob gags at him.
Hmm.
You know, and then also sat there, you've got Thomas Andrews, who knows exactly what the legal situation of that is.
Yep.
Also sitting there, then you've got Archibald Gracie, you've got
Yep.
John Jacob Astor. These
Hmm.
are going to be people who recognize immediately that they're going to have to be quarantined when they get into New York. Now, this is not going to do White Star's share price any good whatsoever.
And we also
Uh,
know
uh,
that Rose's mother, who is sitting at the table, is exceptionally and overtly classist.
yeah, and this is another thing that really kind of grates with me, and I'd sum this up as it's the view of, and I don't want to be unfair to you people here, but it is the view
Yeah.
of an American
Hmm.
middle class arts graduate view of British aristocracy.
That's fair.
And that's what gets me, because if you've got somebody like that family, then where they're talking about, oh, your father's debts and we've had to sell all this land. And like, if they are a state owning aristocracy, as we are led to believe, they are old money.
Hmm.
Well, the one thing old money does is it deals with the working classes all the time. It's got absolutely no problem with them. They're not going to look down at Jack and sneer at him because he is working class. He might be in the wrong place, but he did get invited,
Hmm.
and they would respect that. They might not want to have open conversations with him or socialize beyond there, but they're certainly not going to think he's some form of scruffy alien. These people have valets, these people have servants, these people have maids, these people have gardeners, these people have tenant farmers that they see all the time. They do not look that they will look down on the middle classes because the middle classes are trying to get out of their place. The working classes will mostly stay where they are.
Especially someone like when she's talking to Jack, he doesn't express any ambitions of like, I'm gonna be my own man one day and have my own company. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna live somewhere.
So somewhere I'm going to just keep moving until I
Yeah,
find
life.
somewhere I like.
Yeah. And there's also, as you touched on briefly, there was an incredible social contract at the time where like one of the biggest affronts that you could have was basically being a bad host. Like
Mm,
if you didn't host people, if you were a member of the aristocracy and you were not always ready to entertain and host guests, there's something wrong with you that says that your estate's doing poorly because you don't have the money to just welcome someone in and feed them and entertain them and you're not ready. This it reflects very poorly on you if you are not able to do that. So if someone is given a formal invitation to an event that you are attending, as you said, they probably would have been very respectful of that because the social contract would dictate that at least temporarily this person is welcome in our space.
yeah. Also, you say you have to be a good host, but you also have to be a good guest as well.
Yes, that is the other half of
And
that.
that's possibly even more important because I've read sources where people have been thrown out of houses because they asked somebody's maid to do more than the lady of the house expected of their ladies' maids. And if you are rude to the staff, they're gonna throw you out.
Right, they're not your staff.
Yeah, exactly. But also, that not only if you're rude to the staff is the host going to throw you out, but if you're rude to the staff will throw you out.
Yeah.
I've got sources where it's a country brigadier at a house was getting more than friendly with one of the maids of all work, and the housekeeper literally grabbed hold of him and threw him out the front door.
It's a
That is the understanding that goes on here.
because it's also a bad look for, the other guests and the host. It's like if that's the behavior you encourage in your household, well,
Yeah. But unfortunately, we have to play this idea that Molly Brown can be the bolshy American one that talks sense,
yeah.
the new money that we can all relate to, despite never really having accidentally struck oil and then found yourself in that fortune. And we have to paint these awful British aristocracy people as being awful and British, which just leads me to believe that James Cameron and the writing team never met a British aristocrat.
Well, Ruth herself is American. And to be fair, she is the nastiest one,
Oh no, I think the villain of the piece, the villain is definitely Rose.
who's also American.
Yeah, and
The
awful.
character is American, but she Kate Winslet is not.
But yeah, I mean, you look at Rose as just an awful person. This is my fan theory gone wild, and I will die on this hill. Okay, because people bang on about the door at the end, and that there's room for two. Okay, now I've studied this because I had 3 months off work to recover from an operation, and I
Mm,
just get dead nerdy on things like number one, that if Jack gets on that door, both of them sink.
yeah.
The thing will capsize. Yes, there is room for him on the door, but it will not float to the point where they're not going to freeze to death anyway.
The necessary buoyancy will no longer be there.
Yeah. However, if she'd have just got on the bloody lifeboat that he put her on, he would have survived. Let's assume for a moment that everything else that he does absolutely fine. He does the same thing, even if Cal's not going to let him on the boat on the other side, then he's going to end up at the stern. He's going to go down with the ship. He's going to come back up. He's going to find that door. He's going to get on that door, and she's on the lifeboat. But no, she has to shelve everything for a one night stand with her working class bit of rough, which kills him.
That
She
is,
punches
yeah.
White Star staff. She body slams a steward into a lift. And it's like, just get over yourself, you vapid troll.
But as you said, just wait. Like she was on the lifeboat and he was saying, I think he even said like, I'll be fine. It's like, yeah, that frees him up to use both hands.
Yeah. Yeah. Awful, awful woman. And while we're on the subject of lifeboats as well, this is another one that they always do that tends to drive me up the wall.
Hmm.
A Night to Remember can be just as bad as it. I think Cameron's Titanic is even worse for like laboring this point because you get Thomas Andrews coming in. Just remember there aren't enough lifeboats for everybody on here.
Right.
Yeah. Here's the thing, and this goes wider than the movies because you see it just cropping up in Titanic circles all the damn time. It's like, oh, if there'd have been enough lifeboats for everybody on it. It's like, no, there wouldn't. If you'd have put enough lifeboats on for everybody that was on Titanic, the result would have been exactly the same. We know this because they didn't actually have time to launch all the lifeboats that they had.
Hmm.
Now, you could put an argument in place to say if they'd have filled the lifeboats better, more lives would have been saved.
Yes.
And even then, I'm not going to point the finger too hard at White Star staff for dealing with that. That falls on Captain Smith and generally his crap orders
Hmm.
because he gets everybody together and he goes, right, I think it's about time that we got the women and the children, like, into the lifeboats and lower away. And you take Murdoch and Lightoller, and they interpret that order in two very different ways.
Yes.
So Murdoch goes out onto his side of the deck and starts to fill lifeboats with the women and the children first. And then when there are no women and children allowed, he will fill a lifeboat up with men, lower away, and go. Whereas Lightoller is only putting women and children in lifeboats.
Yes.
That's what his standing order is. Neither of these guys are wrong,
No.
in my opinion. You know, they are carrying out the order that they're understood to be. And the thing on lifeboats as well is at the time, you're not necessarily viewing lifeboats as being something that you are going to use when you have to do a complete evacuation of a ship and be sitting around waiting to be rescued. The whole point of lifeboats is that you use lifeboats to ferry you to another ship, or you use lifeboats to get you the hell out of the way to just clear the ship of people to an extent while they sort a problem out. It's never really set in the mindset of the maritime industry that this is what lifeboats are for. And part of this comes from 3 years earlier as well, in the sinking of the Republic. Because the Republic collides with SS Florida, I think it is. And the Republic takes 9 hours to sink. At which point, everybody can get off and they're taken on board the Florida that's still upright, and away that they go. Now, Titanic is way better designed. You know, it's not unsinkable, and nobody was saying it was unsinkable. They only say practically unsinkable in some very niche engineering journals, which it surprises me that Ruth DeWitt the Carter right. Because when she gets out, goes, oh, so this is the one they say is unsinkable. It's like, where did you get that information, Ruth? I mean, that is seriously niche industry stuff.
Now is when we find out that she's been subscribing to engineering journals since she was 6.
Quite possibly. If I want to really go down a justification route there, though, she's probably been talking to Hockley, who is a
Yep.
Pittsburgh steel baron. He might have looked at those things. He certainly seems to know a lot about the ship when he's getting to it. So, yeah, fair
That's the
point.
serious guess, but
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, they've got so you've got the Republic takes 9 hours to go down. Titanic is way better designed than that. It is way more unsinkable in theory than Republic. So in the event of hitting the iceberg, most people in White Star are sitting there and going, well, we've probably got longer than 9 hours. You know, Baltic's 4 hours away. So what we'll do is we'll clear some decks and get some people out of the way, and then we can work on getting this thing kind of functional,
Yeah,
or at
get the
least to the
pumps
point where
going. We'll
Stanley.
bide ourselves some
Yeah,
time.
and bide ourselves enough time that we can stay up until it gets hit. Yes, we accept that Thomas Andrews says going down is a mathematical certainty, but even Thomas Andrews wasn't prepped for how quickly it went down.
I think that's actually a really, really important note to make. And for dramatic effect, the Cameron film does this really well. There's, iceberg right ahead. The score kicks in, everything gets very fast. It does what it's supposed to do. It gets you excited, it gets you in the moment, gets you a little anxious because that's what that moment is supposed to do to you in the movie
Hmm.
theater. That's not really probably how it was very slow and stuff happened and everyone was kind of like, oh, that's unfortunate. What do we do
Yeah,
now? It was much more ordered. It wasn't this, dramatic action movie panic. And as you were saying, people were thinking like, we have at least 9 hours, like a 9, 10 hours. If
yeah,
I have to do something in 9 to 10 hours, I'm not exactly panicking about getting ready for it right now.
yeah. And if you're at the stern of the ship in the third class quarters for women, and married couples, then at that point, you are practically unaware that something has even happened
Yeah.
because you're that far back that okay, there's a grating noise. Okay, there are grating noises in third class quite a lot.
It's a
You know,
ship made
no,
out of metal.
yeah, exactly. There's right above you the vegetables are moving in the potato room, which I think is the best room on Titanic. They have a room of potatoes.
I need, we need more places that have potato rooms.
Don't we just? Yeah. But there in a way, nobody is going to panic about this because nobody's concerned. And also, nothing's come out from Captain Smith going, yeah, you need to get the hell off now. There's no abandoned ship order or anything like that given at the time. It's just a precautionary measure to get in the lifeboats. People are not going to necessarily take that seriously. So there is no panic, and that lack of panic goes on through all the classes as well. So again, we have this idea that you see in Cameron's movie that everybody's going, oh well, this ship's going down. It's like, great, we need to get out. We're going to batter our way through these locked gates, which of course again are not there. There are locked gates that go between third class and second class. There
Yes.
are small fences that go between second class and first class, but as
There's
soon
nothing
as the
entirely insurmountable, really.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you can step over the fence to first and second class. It's literally on the promenade decks. You're just going to like hop over and stuff like that.
Like,
And it's
whoops.
actually one of the references that we got in the lock gates theories where somebody refers to a lock gate and it is actually just on a promenade deck and is literally about knee high. However, they said open it because then it's a lot easier to get through. But
Of
that's
course.
not this idea of third class being locked below to starve to their poverty-stricken doom that we see in this at all. There are, to the best of our knowledge, there are two major lock gates that are referred to in the inquiry, and they separate actually not third class from second class, but third class from third class.
Hmm.
So you've got single women and married people at the back,
Yes.
and you've got unaccompanied unmarried men at the front,
Yes.
and they keep the two of them separate. In fact, they advertise to people that you can come and travel on a White Star Line and not get sexually assaulted.
Yes, because every single man that is married is it's not a problem. I'm sorry, that was rude. But no, it's
I speak as a married man. We're not all saints.
yeah, I mean, but it's just I think that it's interesting because the myth is obviously it was to protect everyone from the classes. It was like no, it was gender-based protection. It was
Yeah, there's
that protection.
gender-based protection, and then there's protection from the fact that they haven't gone through any kind of real medical examination in third
Hmm.
class, and that's why you physically cannot get to first class without them opening doors. And when they were told to open doors, they opened doors.
Hmm.
There is absolutely no record. Nobody, even out of third class, who testifies at the inquiry, talks about locked gates blocking their route out. The problem that you've got getting out of third class is, well, I counted up. I think there are 67 different languages spoken in third class.
Goodness.
It is crazy. And of course, what language do the crew speak?
English.
English. 90% English. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there is one that one little bit in Cameron's movie where I think is a really good idea is where you just casually walk past and you can see like these what look like Iranian Persian types that are like trying to decipher one of the signs. Because you only go downstairs in any cruise ship even now, and every corridor looks the same.
It does.
You're not going to find your way out, and it's an
No.
absolute warren to try and get out of steerage up to the boat decks.
Especially if you can't read a singular sign. If you can read one sign, you can at least, okay, I'm looking for A deck. Just follow the signs for A deck, A deck, A deck, A deck. But if I don't know what A deck looks like,
Yeah, yeah. Or if you happen to be Persian, you might not be even using the English alphabet.
no, no, not at
So
all.
if I go onto an Arabic ship, even if I'm looking for A deck, I do not know what an A in Arabic script looks like in the least.
No, I was to my previous guest, we were just talking about this in a different context, but we were using that exact same analogy of like if I got onto a ship today, a cruise ship that had only Greek signage, I am going to have to seek out someone who speaks English every time I have a question.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm not
and
going to be able to find the answer.
this is the same for them. And it's very easy to get lost down there. Even members of White Star crew were getting lost down there.
I think Lightoller testifies to that, saying that, even he would still get lost and he walked around the ship for weeks before it even sailed and was
Yeah,
very familiar with it. But despite that, uh-oh,
but
I'm in
yeah,
the wrong place.
I do hate this thing that's done in the movies though, where you get this kind of White Star's evil, and we're going to lock everybody below and get first class passengers off as quickly as humanly possible. Not because it just does a massive service to like the White Star Line and to history, but there are third class stewards that drown
Yeah.
getting people out of third class. And to just say that's not happening, and that there's this, you're just turning actual heroism on its head. And those people didn't come back, and you are shitting all over their story. And I think for the £5,000 that they had to pay to the school that bears Murdoch's name, then anything that bears the name of third class Stuart Cox needs to have £5,000 paid to it as well, because he gave his life going back down and bringing groups out of third class up to the boat decks to get them in.
There's a
The only other kind of locked hatchway evidence that I've ever been able to find was from somebody who was in a lifeboat, and she talked about people being forced down a hatch and then that hatch being locked.
hmm.
Now, I'm not going to say she's wrong, but I'm also not going to say that they are being forced down there to meet their end, when they're probably not. Because the thing about ships that are filling with water is you've got to carefully control where that water goes.
Yes.
So when you lock that hatch down, you lock that hatch down because if you don't, it's going to be a major problem.
Mhm.
Secondly, that hatch we know was towards the bow end. Okay, so the last thing that you want is if water is coming up over the top for it to be sloshing into there as well, adding to your problems where you're getting people drowning from two sides.
Mhm.
Secondly, then where they're going to go when they come up from there, there's no boat, there's no lifeboats at the bow. Okay, so they're going to go onto the bow, which is then just going to make everything heavier.
Yeah.
That's going to go down further. So we have that idea, that is worthy of a greater look at. You can't just dismiss it as, well, we're just shitting all over the working classes.
I think that's sorry, the cat was making so much noise. I had to let her out of the room. It's a really sad tendency, I think, in not just this film, but in a lot of films, because it's a really easy way to strum a chord on a heartstring.
Yeah. And that's the thing, that the Titanic always gets used to portray somebody's prejudices about class or nationality or anything like that. And it shouldn't be, because that was 1,500 people lost at sea. That was a tragedy, and that tragedy deserves to be respected.
And, just remembered for all its intricacies, and is another part of it, because it is a complicated story. It is a story of a maritime disaster, but it is, in its own way, it is also a story of, cultures and lessons learned. And, in a way, it is a lesson about, the differences in class and what have you, but it is a complicated story. It's not any one of those things.
Yeah, but we can have stories about class. You only
Oh,
need to
yeah.
watch Downton Abbey.
Mhm.
You know, that's the only difference there, is that Highclere Abbey does not sink.
Yeah, no, it
And
does manage to stay on its hill.
yeah, exactly. And but we don't get that level of prejudice that's in there that we seem to get in the Titanic, even when it's written by the same guy that made Downton Abbey,
Yeah.
because he was behind the TV miniseries.
Yeah, the 2012 miniseries by Julian Fellows.
Yeah, which is just again,
It's not
please
good.
don't. It's awful.
It's not
It's
good.
um, but yeah, so I've raised myself off my train of thought now.
That's all right. Well, I think we only really got to point number two of stuff that annoys you about the movie. What's next on your list?
It's kind of it's a bit linked to lifeboats in Ismay in its own way. And when I go back to
Okay.
this idea of Ismay going and ordering Captain Smith around and getting
Hmm.
him to light all the boilers because we're going to break records and so forth. And again, we get to this thing then that Ismay orders Smith to go hell for leather through this dangerous stretch of water that is going to be filled with ice. And we're going to blame Ismay for it. Now, first of all, there's a lot of things that I've wrong with this because, first of all, the idea that a captain like Edward J. Smith is going to have any truck with what Ismay's saying at that point, you know, it was going to be Smith's last voyage. What the
Hmm.
hell's Ismay going to do? Fire him? It's
Right.
got absolutely nothing to do. You get this businessman turning up and going, yes, I need you to get there a day early. Okay. And we can go, right, well, I'm in charge here, sunshine. You go back to schmoozing with newspaper barons back down in the first class dining room and just leave it to the sailors, will you? I don't start telling you about how to please White Star shareholders and get the fuck off my bridge.
Hmm.
He's just not going to have any problem with doing that at all.
I mean, neither would I.
Yeah. And secondly, then, what we know from, what we know from the testimonies and what we know from standard maritime practice at the time, if you're in an ice field, the quickest and safest thing you can do in an ice field is get the fuck out of the ice field. So it was not a reckless decision by Smith to speed up when they're getting the ice warnings. It is, in fact, common safety technique of all shipping lines at the time. And that is if you think about sailing, do you sail?
I do not.
You know, so have you ever steered boats and things like that? And
I have done sailing, and my grandfather had a small little oh my God, what the heck is it called? Speedboat. So I'm familiar
speeder.
with the concept of steering a watercraft.
Yeah. So the thing is, if you slow down, you're going to become less maneuverable. Everything on a boat works on the basis of water going past those propellers at different rates and therefore moving you around. Okay, so the thing to consider there is if you are going to slow down and you see the iceberg coming, okay, then odds are you are still not going to get out of the way of the iceberg unless you absolutely floor it forward.
That's true.
So you're going to turn at exactly the same angle. It's just going to take longer. Now, there could be a case to say that, okay, you might not hit it as hard. But the thing is, it was a fairly glancing blow on that iceberg that ripped apart the Titanic anyway. I think it
Yeah.
was very little to do with speed, particularly because they'd slowed down quite significantly when they saw it. And
Yeah.
when they saw it, it was too late to really get out of the way of it. So you may have been able to stop before you saw it, but that would be going against everything that every shipping line is thinking, which is get the hell out of the ice field. Okay. Secondly, you could completely stop, as did Californian. However, there's a problem there that people tend not to think about, which is that iceberg isn't stationary.
No,
That
that's
iceberg is
it's not
floating.
chained to the floor.
No, it's not anchored at all. It is floating ice that is going along with the current. The direction of the current, that iceberg is coming towards them, even if they're not going to stop, even if they're staying exactly where they are. That iceberg's probably going to move with some considerable force right into Titanic anyway. So at least if you are moving, and the quicker you are moving, the better the chance you've got of actually getting the hell out of the way.
If
Now,
anyone
there
here
is a
plays or
theory.
watches, sorry, any contact sports, if this metaphor is not making sense for you, but if you watch any contact sports, especially like American football, look at that next time, especially when you watch like the bigger defenders trying to tackle like a smaller quarterback or something. If there's no speed happening, if they're just kind of standing there, if you're stationary, your chances of kind of making any motion or getting around it are very low. Your chances of glancing into something, bouncing off, or crumbling are much higher.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, if you're stationary, that iceberg is just going to come ram right into you.
Yes.
And that iceberg is actually moving at a surprising amount of speed in that North Atlantic current. It's going to hit you with some force.
Yeah.
Now, there is a theory, and I haven't done the engineering or the stress testing or anything to work on that theory, but there is a theory that, well, there's two theories that may have actually averted disaster. Number one was to ram the thing head on,
Yes.
because then you would have only ruined the bits where you'd got watertight compartments and they may have been able to do it. The other is to evacuate everybody using lifeboats and put them on the iceberg.
It's a fascinating that one. It's an interesting theory. It just sounds ridiculous
Yeah.
when you because it
Yeah. It
is.
sounds ridiculous to us until we actually sit there and think about it. Now, if you sit and think from the point of view of Edward Smith, and I have to say, I'm not I'm not Captain Smith's biggest fan at all. I think he makes some really freaking ridiculous decisions, which I'll
Sure.
come to why in a moment. But if you get iceberg right ahead, bell ringing, radio down, pick up the phone, iceberg right ahead, you've got seconds where probably the first thing you think is fuck.
Yep.
You're not thinking, well, if I hit this thing head on,
No.
you're going to get out of the way of it. So that bit I understand. Where I really part company with any admiration for Smith is, as I hinted to before, Smith has this long glittering, and he's probably he's recognized as one of the finest sea captains in the whole civilian maritime fleet.
He does have a
And
very long resume.
yeah, and do you know what that resume doesn't contain? A single disaster.
Yeah.
This is Smith's point, because when the actual disaster happens, he just freaking falls apart. He stumbles around this idea of, oh, do we need to evacuate this? Should we just take some precautions? What is it? And there's so much time where something could have been done. And I'm not really going to spend too much time kind of overly judging and blaming the dead,
Sure.
but he stumbles and stumbles and stumbles to giving that abandoned ship order.
Yeah. Which
And
I'm
I
sure
think,
that's hard. You know.
yeah, I don't blame him. He was sitting there on a glittering, practically unsinkable ship, and he would have read that.
Yeah, with a practically unsinkable career.
Yeah. And it was, it was his swan song. It was his retirement. I can understand him mentally falling apart. I mean, I've never been in command of anything that suffered a major disaster, and I would probably fall apart. So I'm not going to judge him on that basis.
I don't remember what movie or TV show it was, but it was the character had been, working and working and working and working towards something, and something, not literally, their ship hitting an iceberg, but something happened and it didn't go. And I just, the reaction at the time, I remember thinking was kind of bratty, but then I thought about it, was they just went, no, this isn't supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And people around them are like, you're not, what's your reaction? It's like, no, I can see where that's the reaction. It's like, this is not, no. I was 3 days away from sailing back home to enjoy my life with my wife. This has never happened to me before. What in the actual fuck?
Yeah.
This isn't fair. No, I'm just like you, and I've also been in some situations where, in retrospect, I'm like, I should have said or done this thing, but in the moment, I kind of just stood there because I was
Yeah.
shocked or upset or just surprised.
Yeah. Yeah, it was he could have done better, but I'm not going to judge him for it. I've got no idea how I would have actually behaved in such a situation.
No,
But the buck has to stop with somebody, and the buck is going to stop with the captain. It's part of the job.
yes,
You can get judged for that. So Smith, we can judge.
yes.
Ismay, let's be fair.
it is just way harder to be, I'm not saying that we're right. It is harder to be fair to someone that has been portrayed that way for so long. And as you said, the only crime was survival. We've gotten a little more generous as a society with people surviving, but, especially men surviving a disaster, whereas we've established a majority of people aboard the ship died. People were, fairly or not, really, really unkind about that concept because, you and I, when,
Mhm.
have talked about it, it's like, what else could he have done? Just die? It's, sure, maybe, but
Yeah.
it
Let's
doesn't.
not forget who the bulk of those casualties are as well, because everybody goes, oh, you've got the greatest level of casualties are in third class. No, no. The greatest number of casualties on Titanic is crew.
Crew. Yeah, it's the
Crew,
crew,
stokers. If you want to, if you want to talk about class divisions, there's your class division right there.
the
Is the
literal
crew
working
and
class.
stokers. Yeah. And again, White Star Crew gets so badly portrayed in all of these films, and it's like, for fuck's sake, there's what, 789 people survived Titanic. I think that is down to the crew.
Yeah.
The fact that they are alive is down to the crew.
Yeah, I mean,
Respect that.
just one name off the top of my head. Phillips, our
The wireless operators.
wireless operator. Sorry, my brain decided it was going to shut off for a moment. Yes, our wireless operator who was given the chance to evacuate, but decided, no, I'm just going to stay here and drown to death trying to send out this message. This is the choice I have made.
Yeah, yeah.
And the postal
Cox, who
workers,
drowns going down
yes,
to get third class out,
the postal workers were trying to save the mail, you guys. Every
Yeah,
single one of them died. No one from the postal department on Titanic survived. We got a couple people that survived from engineering, Frederick Fleet, chief fireman, I believe. He survived, but nobody from postal services made it off that ship. Not a single one.
yeah. And yet, time and time again, we just portray the White Star crew as, in some cases, in best cases, bumbling English types that deserve to get punched in the face, and at
Yeah.
worst, actual murderers. And it's just not on.
No. I know that you mentioned that you probably didn't want to. I didn't know if you wanted to touch on Murdoch because a lot of people talk about him. But talking about the malignment of the crew, we go to those scenes in third class in, Cameron's film where you have the stewards holding guns through the gates,
Yeah, and pickaxe handles and
battering
so
people in
forth.
the heads. It's very
To the
violent.
best of my knowledge, A, that never happened, and B, the third class stewards don't have guns.
No, that if
Guns
they did, it
are
would be a
guns are
personal
officers.
pistol.
There are shots fired. I believe there are shots fired by Lightoller.
I think that's what people
Don't
have
believe there
just
is anybody actually shot.
I don't I mean there's obviously conflicting testimonies. There's some people who swear they heard or saw an officer suicide and there some people who said no way. I wasn't there. So,
Hmm.
I mean, I personally wasn't, but
My last thing that I will rage about, and this is not much of a rage, it's just kind of a feeling of exasperation, is the eternal debate as to the last song played. Who
yeah.
the hell cares?
Yeah, that's kind of where I've come down on that matter too.
Hats off again to Wallace Hartley and his band.
Mhm.
And he is broadly local to me. He was a bandmaster about 12 miles away from my house. So we've got a bit of a local pride in Wallace Hartley here.
Mhm.
But if he wanted to play Nearer My God to Thee at the time that he recognized his death, because he did say it was his favorite hymn, then good luck to him. But we have
Yes.
got so much evidence that says it wasn't.
Mhm. It was
We've got
autumn.
Yeah, we've got Autumn that comes from the surviving radio operator. We've also got testimony from Archibald Gracie that said if he was playing something that somber, he would have complained. And we know as well that Gracie was right there at the end because he's actually swept off the deck on a deck chair.
Yes.
He stays right till the end, whereas the woman who claims to have heard him play "Nearer My God to Thee" is 250 yards away for an hour and a half before the sinking actually happens. And I don't think you could actually hear what the band are playing from 250 yards away from a sinking ship where everybody is screaming.
Not unless you're a dog, maybe.
Possibly so.
I have no
But
idea.
thank you. I have got a lot off my chest tonight. Thank you very much.
Well, I am very glad. And before I let you go and find something else to get angry about, you told us about the premise of your show at the very beginning, but as you've mentioned, you also have 100 million guests coming up. But who's coming up soon? What are the next few people that are coming up on this roster?
So the next couple of people that I've got going out on general release, because if you do support me on Patreon, you do get your rages 3 months early and ad free. But our next two episodes that'll be coming up at the time that this is going out. First of all, a Dr. David Kenyon, who's the lead research historian at Bletchley Park. He's coming to rage that Bletchley Park does not shorten the war by 2 years, despite what everybody, including a couple of Bletchley Park guides, actually may say. And then following that, I've got Penny Griffiths Morgan from the Haunted Histories podcast, and she is coming to rage that the workhouse is nothing like Charles Dickens portrayed it.
Oh, I want to listen to that one.
Yeah, and you should.
I will.
But
I
yeah,
listen to too many podcasts.
that will be respectively, that's episode 116 and 117 respectively. So we've got a huge back catalogue that you
We,
can go back through as well.
yes, and you should, at least as
And
me.
you just search for History Rage wherever you found Titanic Talkline, or you can get us on historyrage.com, and you can follow us on Twitter at History Rage.
Yes, and if you are somewhere like in your car where you cannot write that down, when you're somewhere safe, you can check the description box and I will have those links. Please do not get into accidents trying to do anything. That would make me very unhappy. But Paul, thank you so much for coming on. I'm sure that in the future I will have you back on again because I'm sure at some point you will find new Titanic things to be upset about and I will want to hear about them.
Oh, many. I may come back to go to take apart Titanic conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I want to do that.
Yeah.
Listeners, I got very excited in the background and forgot that I was supposed to speak. Yes, I want to do that. We will have to do that sometime in the very near future. But again, thank you so much for coming on. It was
It
an
has been a
absolute joy.
simple joy. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. And I will talk to you soon. And thank you to everyone for continuing to listen. Appreciate you.